Hello, America. Today, it's kind of like Oprah. I've got a crowd of women here with us. We're talking a little bit about the founders, except not the men. We've had a bunch of white men. We've done 2 Founding Fridays on black men. Heroes, all of them. But what about the women? I have to tell you, this one, either the art was really, really bad back then, or they just had ugly, ugly people. Let me ask the audience on when did women get the right to vote? 1920. Yes, 1920. What would you say if I told you not true? Women could vote in the 1700s. Would anybody believe me?
No.
Yeah, you will by the end of the show. How about women serving in the military? Did women serve in the military?
Yes.
Yes, really? How do you know that? You know any names? Do you know any stories? Molly Pitcher. This woman. This is another example. This is another example of, well, let me show you this. This woman actually was in the military as well, I think, but she was impersonating a man, and I don't think she had to do an awful lot. But here's Molly Pitcher. She was commissioned by George Washington, and I wouldn't mess with her. I wouldn't mess with her. You're going to meet not just Martha Washington. Who knows anything about Martha Washington? Did Martha Washington travel with George Washington during the war? No? She was actually about 50% of the time on the battlefield. She was with, did anybody know what she did?
Yes, she knitted.
She knitted? Kind of. She knitted, but she actually, you know, you always hear the story that Valley Forge was awful, and, you know, they didn't have shoes. When I really read the accounts of Valley Forge, it was way beyond shoes. They didn't have pants. They didn't have shirts. Some of them, I mean, were naked out in the winter. And Martha Washington would come up and she would make them clothing. That was her service. But you wouldn't think, you'd think, okay, maybe, you know, a woman was sewing. But not necessarily that, and certainly not voting. What happened to our history? You'll see tonight, that is the big question on all of it. I mean, how many of you guys have been watching the Founding Fridays? Have you learned amazing things that you're like, how do I not know that? Does anybody have an explanation on why we didn't learn this stuff yet? Anybody have a theory on why isn't this stuff being taught? Is it important stuff or is it just frivolous? So why is it left out? I think it could be that, was somebody going to say something?
It's intentionally left out.
It's intentionally left out. Could be intentionally left out for power reasons. Could be just neglect of history. I mean, how many of us have really neglected our own history? I can't figure out why some of this stuff is left out. I will tell you that voting, we're going to start with voting, I think, on what happened to a woman's right to vote. You'll see, as is almost all of the problems, politics. Let me bring in our guest. David Barton is here. David is, I think, the most important man in America right now. How are you, David?
Thanks, man. Good to be with you.
He's with Wall Builders. He has authored the book, The Wives of the Signers. Also with us is Jane Hampton Cook. She is the author. How are you? Good to see you. She is the author of Stories of Faith and Courage from Revolutionary War. She also wrote the book called Faith of America's First Ladies. Okay, so let's start with women's right to vote. I thought it was 1920.
The revolution changed a lot of things. It changed the relationship we had politically, but it also changed a lot of cultural things, as we've seen on other Founders Fridays with black founding fathers. At that point in time, suddenly a lot of the founding fathers were able to express themselves as abolitionists, which they couldn't do under the British law. Same with women. 1776, we wipe out 13 British governments. We got to go create new governments. So the founding fathers from New Jersey who signed the Declaration, they went back, started writing their own state constitution as they did in other states. New Jersey, they wrote into the Constitution the right for women to vote. So women started voting in New Jersey in 1776. And that was a right that the founding fathers put into the documents. And women had voted in colonial America before that as well. In Pennsylvania back in the French and Indian War, etc. but they put it in
But
Constitution.
all right, but it wasn't in Pennsylvania. Was it a constant?
It was not constant. Interestingly enough, the voting rights were tied a lot of times to ownership of property. If you own property, you could vote. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, being from Texas, our schools are funded by property taxes. Mm-hmm. The deal is we who own property pay the taxes for everybody who goes to school, but the problem in Texas is 47% of people own property, the other 53 don't. So you've got a majority of people telling the property owners what we're going to pay for taxes to support the kids. And the Founding Fathers said, wait a minute, you shouldn't be able to tell people what to do with their own property if you don't have a vested interest in losing your own property. So you had to be a property owner to vote. Now, they made it easy. In Pennsylvania, you could buy land for 1 penny an acre. They wanted you to be a property owner. But once you had it, that affected the way you thought about telling people what to do with their property. So the property rights concept was tied to, so women could vote if they owned property, but a lot of times being married, the husband's property is in the husband's name, but if the husband died and the woman inherited the property, she could vote. So property owners could vote.
It's the problem really with like rental cars.
Yeah.
If you have a,
Yeah.
I mean, I just want Hertz to know, I rent a car, I watch it like it's my own. But others who will remain nameless might not. You know, you have your own car, you kind of drive it, and you're like, you park it in the back of the parking lot. You know, you park up next in any jalopy if it's not your car. And so that was.
Now it was that way in New Jersey. New Jersey, the constitutional provision was anyone who was worth 50 pounds money could vote. So it wasn't just straight out every woman gets to vote. It wasn't straight out every man could vote. It was if you had some worth, you
That's
could
after
vote.
1776.
1776.
When did it go away?
It went away in 1809.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
Were they the only state that did it?
The only one constitutionally that did it. There were other states where you had some voting provisions, but the only one constitutionally that did that. And
So the year, I think this is the year after we abolished the slave trade.
1808, we abolished the slave trade
The
through
next
Congress.
year, we take African Americans and say, we're not going to do this as trade anymore. We're halfway home.
Yeah.
The next year, we're like, yeah, but that women thing, I don't know.
Well, it was interesting because significantly the rise of political parties, and you have all these political parties that started, two primary ones, Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and this Jefferson-Adams kind of the fight they got into. By 1809, most of the women were voting with the Federalists. So when the Anti-Federalists got power in New Jersey, they said, wipe out the women's vote. They're voting in the wrong political party. We're not going to be able to sustain ourselves with it. So that's really where the woman's right to vote went away. It wasn't on grounds of equality or inequality. It was on the grounds of, they vote for the wrong party. Now that we've got control, we're going to take the power away.
Well, and you just think, too, the whole concept was based on taxation without representation.
Yeah.
That's what we were crying out against in 1776. And to think, really, in a short time, it was taken away for a good number of people.
But women played, I mean, I think everybody, if I said smartest woman founder or most active woman founder, who would you say? Anybody come to mind? Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams, was she the pinnacle of an active political woman?
I think so, and I think the reason why we think that about her is because of her writing record. We have her letters, and we don't have that with a lot of these other women, and that's why we don't know as much in part. But Abigail was the breadwinner in that family. I mean, when John Adams joined the Continental Congress, he gave up his law practice. That was half of their income. Abigail said, I'll take over the other half. I'll become a farmeress. I hope to be as good a farmeress as you are a statesman.
A farmeress.
Yes, a farmeress. And you know, by all accounts, she was better at it than he was, because he was getting letters from his neighbors saying, you know, Abigail's doing a pretty good job, better than you ever did. And
May I just say, and my mother-in-law is in the audience, so close your ears. Sometimes guys pretend to be bad at stuff, so then the wife, honey, you are so good at that. I just think it's like wrapping presents. You know your husband stinks at wrapping presents, so on Christmas Eve, you're wrapping all the presents. Really? We're better than you. We just aren't.
that is true. But
you know your husband gets worse when he wraps presents, doesn't he?
it does.
He does.
I purposely wrap the presents
Yeah, I
badly
know.
so he'll do
I
it.
know.
But you know, the thing about Abigail is she didn't like farming. It turned out to be a really difficult thing. She came into counterfeit money accidentally and lost a lot of money. Her tenants would just up and quit and wouldn't pay their rent. They had crop shortages. It was really, really hard work.
She was pretty much by herself, though, wasn't she? I mean, John.
She had her kids with her, and
Yeah,
one of the
working
interesting things is the writings of John Quincy Adams talking about what he did with his mama and how they were on the hill overlooking Bunker Hill when the battle went on, the burning of Charleston, and so she was very active in a lot of ways, and a lot of those around her did a lot of recording of what she did. So you have her writings, you have the writings of other parts of the family, but she was so respected and so good at what she did that in 1775, the Continental Congress appointed her to part of a committee that we might call like an intelligence committee.